Many expect there to be a significant change in the offseason for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Could that include a coaching change and a major blockbuster deal involving Mitch Marner, possibly to bring in an all-star goaltender? We'll discuss those possibilities. Plus, we have lots of other news to talk about today, including the finalists for the 10 Lindsay Trophy. We have lots of playoff action to recap, more news in the NHL draft lottery, and another trade rumor around the Winnipeg Jets. A lot more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about here today. Let's first get started with some of the playoff action. We had a couple of really fun and entertaining playoff games here last night. We saw the New York Rangers take a 2-0 series lead over the Carolina Hurricanes with an overtime victory. That was a double overtime. Vinny Trocheck scoring the winning goal. He had a heck of a game for the Rangers. Overall, it was very close, but the Rangers come out on top. Certainly, like I said, there's lots of physicality, some very nice goals, goaltenders playing well. Like, it was just a really highly entertaining game. I think for me, it's got to be one of the top one or two playoff games I've seen so far this offseason. It was a heck of a win for the Rangers and just an overall entertaining game overall. One thing that was concerning, though, was Jacob Trouba and the fact that he darn near took off the head of Marty Necas of the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, technically, there was no call because he did not connect. I know NHL player safety and even referees have the match penalty for intent to injure. Sometimes they don't actually, become successful in injuring the other player. However, they do try. And this, to me, was a clear case of intent to injure. He comes flying in, and I'll show you a picture here. He comes in almost Superman style with his elbow stuck out. Thankfully, Necas saw him last second and ducked down, and Trouba goes into the boards awkwardly. He got right back up. Obviously, he didn't seem to hurt himself on the play, but imagine if he had it connected. Now, one thing you can't really tell too well from the picture is that when Trouba does come down now, his skate does get Necas in the back of the head. So like he could have, rammed him right in the face with his elbow and then in the back of the head with his skate. Like, it was a reckless, dangerous play. We all know Jacob Trouba likes to throw the big hits. In my opinion, there are some times when it is not clean, and there have been times when it's been over the top and just, something, he needs to tone it down a little bit. He can still throw the big hits, but there's ways to do it a little bit less recklessly, more clean, and that to me was not it. And I know playoff hockey's ramped up, they let more stuff go, but holy cow, thank God for Necas that did not connect, and I'm still surprised that we've heard nothing from player safety here so far. The other game last night was the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche kicking off that Western Conference series. Early in the first period, it looked like it was going to be a runaway for the Dallas Stars. They were up 3-0. I was only kind of checking in on that game while the Rangers-Canes game was in overtime. I didn't want to miss the overtime winner, so I was kind of fixated on that game and just kind of checking in on Stars Avalanche, and I was like, oh wow, Dallas is off to a real hot start here. But they did not win that game. The Avalanche slowly started playing better. In the second period, they got a couple of goals. Then they get it tied. Went to overtime. Miles Wood scores the overtime winner thanks to his really quick feet. Like, Miles Wood is a really fast skater, and his speed is what allowed him to get in all alone and get a shot on that and beat Jake Ottinger for the comeback victory. So the Avalanche, I tell you, they had a rough start, but man, when they got going, were they ever good. Dallas is going to have their hands full, which we already suspected. I did pick the Avs to win the series in my prediction. I also considering Dallas was at home, they had them down 3 goals. Not saying that it's a write-off and it's a given and it's going to be all Avs from here or anything like that, but it is a case where the Stars had a prime opportunity, then they blew it, and the Avalanche just proved to be too strong. So I do wonder how the series is going to go. Dallas is going to have nightmares about that game, letting that slip away. That much we can say for sure. They can't really let themselves get to the point where they're undisciplined, because the power play is lethal, and that's what generated a few of those goals last night. and they have to stay out of the box. They can't give them that many opportunities or they will pay for it. It's just that simple. Tonight, of course, we have some more action with the Bruins and Panthers going back at it for game number 2 of their round 2 series. And then, of course, the Oilers and the Canucks kick off their series a little bit later this evening. We got the finalists today as well for the Ted Lindsay Award for Most Outstanding Player. Now, this one is voted on by the players themselves. The 3 finalists are Nikita Kucherov, Nathan MacKinnon, and Austin Matthews. Quite often, but not always, the finalists are usually the same as the Hart Trophy, but like I said, not always. The only one that's different this time is Matthews gets the nod here over McDavid. McDavid had a fine season, of course, but he did have a slow start and an extremely strong finish to get him caught up in points and leading his team from the basement all the way up to almost a division title, not quite, and into a strong playoff spot, which is why he got so much love for the Hart over Matthews. He obviously put up way more points, and I know there's more to things than just points, but Matthews had a strong season as well, and certainly approaching 70 goals and being a strong 200-foot player. Obviously got himself a lot of respect with his peers, which is why he got the votes here in this case. So we'll see who wins. I still suspect it'll be Kucherov or McKinnon, the same as the Hart. But Matthews gets a little bit more love on this one than he did on the Hart Trophy. A few other news notes around the league today. The St. Louis Blues today announced they've signed Hugh McGinn to a 2-year, 2-way deal. The Ottawa Senators introduced Travis Green as their new head coach. We had done a video and reported yesterday that they were going to be hiring him as the new head coach, and today would be the official announcement on the press conference, and that was the case. To be honest, I thought the press conference came off relatively well. He said a lot of the things, as well as Steve Staios, that I expected them to stay, that ultimately Travis Green checked a lot of the boxes for what they were looking for, a very demanding but fair coach who's good at communication, obviously somebody who's good at development, player development, used to working with a lot of young players. He coached in junior in the Western Hockey League, has a championship under his belt. He got to coach a very young Canucks team as well. I think he did better than his record shows in Vancouver, given the fact that he had a bit of a disastrous group leading the charge in management, and they also dealt with a couple of pandemic-based seasons. And that year in the North Division, his record might have been bad, but the Canucks were ravished with COVID. That team was sick all year. It was a large part of it why the team didn't do better in that year. So obviously, like I said, Travis Green checked a lot of the boxes. He's going to hold the players accountable. He's going to demand hard work. He also made it known that he's got an open door policy. So if the players ever want to talk to him or disagree with something or want clarification on something, he's always open to talking about it. At the same time, like he said, he wants to get to know each player. He's not going to coach every player the same because they all need different things. Like he wants to be fair, firm, and hold them accountable, demand hard work. But he realizes that everybody needs something a little bit different to help them be successful, and that's what he's going to try to do. So to me, he said a lot of the right things, and I understand why he was chosen by Steve Staios and the Ottawa Senators to be the next head coach. You got to remember, like I said before, under Eugene Melnyk, they went through a lot of years of pain, suffering, and cheapness. That's not the case anymore, and just because they didn't get the big sexy name on the list just because Craig Berube didn't come to Ottawa, it doesn't mean they're cheaping out here. At the end of the day, if they were not willing to pay bigger money on a coach, then why did they even interview Craig Berube or Todd McClellan or any of those guys that were used to making bigger money and have more success on their resume? At the end of the day, if they didn't think they were going to be able to compete salary-wise, they wouldn't have talked to them. Why would they waste their time? It's just that simple. So, and like Steve Staios also said, a lot of the coaches that are right now in the second round of the playoffs, coaching teams that are contending, their first go around wasn't the greatest either. Look at Rick Tocchet, prime example. Lots of teams would love to have Rick Tocchet right now, but before he got to Vancouver, his record wasn't awesome. I said, look at Andrew Brunette, same thing in Nashville. He went through a couple of times being overlooked, and here we are, right? The 2 of the Jack Adams Award finalists. So at the end of the day, I think they'll be okay. The bigger part of the issue is going to be goaltending and the roster. And obviously Staios has work to do on that front, and that'll be the more interesting part of the offseason for Ottawa from my point of view. From the draft lottery, that was big news yesterday. The draft lottery was taking place last night. We learned that the San Jose Sharks were the winners and won the first overall pick. The right to draft Macklin Celebrini. Of course, there were some reporters in the room when the draft lottery was taking place. They have a lot of variety of people there as witnesses, basically, to make sure that everything's no funky business, no tampering, no nothing. They have the reps from Ernst & Young, members of the media, and those guys are not allowed to write any stories or even have their phones or computers and everything while it's going on. They have to give up all that stuff until it's publicly announced. But then, of course, they can acknowledge the fact that they were there and write stories about it after. And one of the articles that came out from one of the reporters, I was looking through it, and there's some teams that were so close. Obviously, it's a series of ping pong balls numbered between 1 and 14 in the machine, and as they draw the numbers out, the number sequences are all kind of just like the different lotteries that you can win money at. There's basically on your ticket you have a series of numbers, and it's the same idea with the draft lottery. Your numbers line up, you win, essentially, and the better your odds, basically you have more tickets in that draw. The draw was 2, 7, 10, 11, okay? After the first 3 balls were drawn, up to the 2, 7, 10, besides the Sharks, there was the Blackhawks, the Kraken, the Ottawa Senators, and the new team in Utah were all 1 ball away. They matched the first 3 numbers of that sequence. The Blackhawks needed to draw a 3 and they would win it. Utah needed an 8 to come out next and they would win it. Ottawa needed a 12 to come out next and they would win it. And the Kraken needed a 5 to come out and they would win it. Ultimately, 11 came out, which gave the Sharks the win. So theoretically, you could say Ottawa was the closest, which I know Sens fans don't want to hear that, to know how close they were. And ultimately, when they don't win, you stay at number 7. Doesn't really do you any good. But out of the 4-digit sequence, it was 2, 7, 10, 11, where the Sens had 2, 7, 10, 12. What a kick in the pants that is. I mean, if they would have been able to add Macklin Celebrini to that team, that would have made a huge difference moving forward for sure. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy when you look at things after the fact and learn about the lottery, but it was an interesting time for sure. Longtime NHLer Oskar Lindblom is leaving the NHL and heading back to Sweden. He signed a multi-year contract to play over there, so you won't be seeing Oskar Lindblom in the NHL possibly again, but at least for the next couple of years for sure. Now, when it comes to the Winnipeg Jets, there's still a lot of expectations that we're going to see some movement. We know they need a new coach after the announcement of Rick Bowness's retirement. That very well is going to come internally, not a given, but I do suspect we're going to see Scott Arniel slide into that position, and he's already had to do a few times on an interim basis when Rick Bowness had to be away from the team. He knows the players, he knows the team. He's done a good job in Bowness's absence before. I'd be surprised, if they don't hire him. They probably will look around a little bit, but at the end of the day, I suspect that's what they're going to settle on. And there definitely needs to be some movement within the roster. There's a new Athletic article from their Winnipeg Jets beat writer, and he says that he fully suspects Nick Ehlers to very likely be traded this offseason, likely either at or before the NHL draft at the end of June. Ehlers is coming to the near the end of his contract. Could tell in his exit interview that he didn't come across as the most happy, and obviously his role changed a lot. Now, of course, getting a new coach there, maybe that'll change how he feels, and maybe that'll the team will have second thoughts, but at this point, all indications are that he could be dealt. A couple of teams that come to mind being a great fit for Ehlers to me would be the New York Islanders or maybe the Seattle Kraken. A couple of teams that are, I wouldn't say starving for offense, but desperately need some upgrades. I mean, I think he would fit very well on the top line with the Islanders. It could be a great complementary piece to a guy like Matthew Barzal or Bo Horvat. In Seattle, they need definitely more scoring for sure. Their offense dried up this year. He's pretty consistent, 25, 30 goal scorer, has great speed. He could help a lot of teams, really. And they're not the only teams. I could probably sit here if I thought hard enough and looked at the roster construction. Could easily name off probably another 5 or 6 teams that I think he would fit well with and whatnot. The problem is not everybody's going to have the cap space, and not everybody's going to have a good return package that the Jets are going to want. So at the end of the day, it's difficult to say exactly where Nick Ehlers goes, but right now the expectation amongst Winnipeg media is the feeling is he is more than likely going to be dealt. So will be a key player to watch ahead of the draft, or when we see the activity pick up at the draft. Now, when it comes to the Leafs, first up, let's talk about Sheldon Keefe. Then we're going to talk about Mitch Marner. Lots of talk around Keefe today between Elliot Friedman and Darren Dreger, both covering this in a multitude of areas. I've seen a couple of radio hits of Darren Dreger. Of course, Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick had a new 32 Thought podcast out this morning as well. And the general consensus here seems to be that it's pretty much a given that Sheldon Keefe is going to be let go. Now, until they announce that and confirm it, it's not a done deal, and it's not 100%. But Dreger seems to usually have pretty good sources when it comes to the Leafs. He's usually pretty bang on. And his words were that it's pretty much a given, the writing's on the wall. So at this point, I think I'd be more surprised to find out that he's coming back than he'd be let go. Now, I've personally, given today's Wednesday, we know the Leafs management, which is supposed to include Brad Treliving, Brendan Shanahan, and the new MLSE president, Keith Pelley, on Friday morning. I have a feeling we're going to probably get an announcement from the Leafs sometime tomorrow that Sheldon Keefe has been relieved of his duties. That, if I had to predict, that's what I think is going to happen. And then we already know they're definitely going to want to have it come out prior to their presser on Friday morning. It wouldn't make sense. They usually never want to announce it directly unless they do that. But of course, it's usually done ahead of time via statement, and then they can talk about it further and answer questions at the media presser. So we'll see. That's got to be a prediction there. I mean, as far as who's the next head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, if that comes to fruition, I think Craig Berube's in the mix. But like as I heard Frank Saravalli say in the last day or so, he said he wonders if the Leafs don't act quickly, that Craig Berube might not even be available. And I know I've heard a lot of people, other members of the media, saying, does Berube really want to go to Toronto? Look at, how a combination of the fact that the high pressure, how the team has, struggled, but it's good on paper, good regular season, but it's really struggled. Is he really going to push them over the top? Or does he want to go to a quieter area like the Devils, who also have a great young team and could use his tutelage, So New Jersey's definitely in the mix. Now, the Devils are also believed, besides Berube, are rumored to be talking to Jay Woodcroft, out of the former Oilers bench boss. So he's reportedly in the mix there. I know with Travis Green, one of the things we learned about the how he left New Jersey and got hired in Ottawa. About a week ago, he said he was talking to both the Senators and the Devils. So it wasn't a given that he wasn't going to get the job in New Jersey, but when they wanted to kind of take their time and talk to some other people as well, they gave him permission. Like, if you want to do the same thing, that's we understand. It's okay. And then here we are. So, at the end of the day, he had to explore some options. And when he saw an opportunity to get a permanent job in a, different team, and he wasn't sure if he's going to be able to take that or have that offered to him in New Jersey. And maybe he didn't really want to stay there too. We don't know, right? Anyway, so the Devils are talking to a variety of people, and he will be in competition with the Leafs for some of the same bench bosses. I would think maybe Todd McClellan and Dean Evison might get in the mix there. I wonder, there's a job in San Jose. The Sharks just won the lottery, so they're going to be getting Celebrini. That job just became more attractive. We know the Jets are now looking for a new bench boss after Rick Bowness retired. So, I'm not sure how much influence they'll have over some of these guys too. So it's going to be interesting to see where everybody lands. But at the end of the day, I think Berube would be a prime name to watch in Toronto. I do wonder, and this is just me kind of wondering to myself here. I have no intel on this from anybody, but I kind of half wonder about Quenneville. There is some connections there with him to the team. I wonder if they would want to go down that road. Obviously, we know he wants to get back to the NHL. We know he needs to get clearance from Gary Bettman and the NHL to take a job like that. They'd have to speak to Bettman first. We know Quenneville's been doing a lot of media in the past couple of months, trying to get which is, I assume, to try to get his name back up there and kind of rehabilitate his image a little bit after being linked to that scandal in Chicago. I think for the most part, he said a lot of the right things to kind of, rebuild that image a bit. So I don't know. I mean, he's a very experienced coach. He's obviously got a lot of success on his resume, something that the Leafs would want, and it's hard to say. Now, the other thing with Shanahan, it's believed at this point that he's not going anywhere, given that he's going to be part of this media conference on Friday. So, will they address his future? It's difficult to say. At most, I would suspect they'll say, he's here and he's not going anywhere. So I don't know if they'll talk to him about a contract extension. I would think that would be wise for them not to kind of wait and see how things go. Let them ride this one out first and then make a decision. But we'll see, I guess, on that front. But when it comes to the roster, pretty much everybody at this point that's been reporting on this with all the sources and intel indicate that some major moves are definitely going to come to Toronto. Now, at the very least, they're going to try. You got to remember, they've given all their star players no move clauses. So at the same time, this is not going to be super easy. But according to Elliotte Friedman and Jeff Merrick on the 32 Thoughts podcast, and I also heard in a Leaf report with Jonas Seigel and James Muriel talking, there was belief that Marner was, I guess it was Muriel and Seigel talking that they said that they heard last summer, before the no-move clause kicks in for Marner, that there was belief and, possible that he was going to be traded then, and that he even thought that it was likely going to happen, and he seemed to be okay with it. Of course, we know Shanahan later steps in and says, no, we're not trading any of the core four guys. They're all coming back. Kind of handcuffed Dubas before he ended up leaving due to his own negotiation and all that. But they were definitely having a difference of philosophy and difference of opinion on how to take the team into the next direction, from the next phase to try to win. I think, which is why they butted heads and parted ways, amongst other things. So at the same time, not to say that Dubas also wanted more control because of that butting of heads and difference of opinion too. So at the same time, hard to say, but there was belief there. There was also some talk about Marner on the podcast with Jonas Seigel and James Muriel, saying how the outside noise really gets to Marner. His people tell him everything, even though he stays off social media, or at least he says he does. That his camp kind of scrutinizes everything, and I think it was Myrtle or Seigel, one of them said that the Marner family have completely blackballed them when it comes to getting any information or anything, and they don't even know why. They've never written anything unfavorable or really said anything bad. They don't understand at all. And there were some reports that they had heard that Marner's either Marner himself or his camp, which would include his close family, that they sometimes have hired security people to harass different media members because they didn't like what they said or their opinion or what they wrote or whatnot. This seems like there's a lot of immaturity there, and that they can't handle any type of criticism, which is, maybe it's best that he get out of Toronto, to be completely honest. And that seems to be the consensus here amongst all these reporters, is that it's time for Mitch to move on, and that a lot of people are acknowledging that, and it's time for a change here, and that the Leafs are going to talk to him about waiving his no-move clause. Now, there's also comments from Friedman today, Elliotte Friedman, saying that he doesn't know that Mitch Marner would even want to sign an extension, not even with Toronto, but necessarily with anybody, because his agent, Darren Ferris, typically does recommend to get his clients to go test the market of free agency. He's 1 year away from having that, almost once in a career type opportunity to kind of pick your spot and get a long-term deal. So Marner may not even want to sign an extension, which could actually impact his ability to be traded. Even if he says to the Leafs, okay, I'll give you a few teams I'd be willing to go to and waive my no-move clause for, but I'm not signing an extension. They're going to have to take me as is for the 1 year that I'm testing the market. That might hinder things. It really could. But at the same time, we'll have to wait and see. That's not a given, but there is belief from Elliotte Friedman's comments that very well could be the case, but we won't know that. I'll be able to confirm that until the summer comes and goes, and as we'll hear stuff about Marner's desire to want an extension or not. But one of the trades that I've seen proposed today in an article was sending Marner to Nashville for UC Saros. And I was like, you know what? That honestly makes a lot of sense. Not only does it give Nashville a top scorer, we know that Barry Trotz and the Nashville Predators, they need offense, and they want to attract a top offensive player. That's not a secret. Most players seem to love playing in Nashville. Obviously, it's a great market. The nightlife, just the entertainment life, like the life outside the rink, it seems to be quite a fun place to live, and a lot of players really love it there. So there is that idea, right? And of course, the Leafs get themselves an all-star goaltender to solidify the position. It's pretty clear that I don't think Samsonov's going to be back. And the thing with Joseph Woll, he's a good goaltender, but he's pretty much the same age as Marner. But he's always been hurt. His development has been delayed drastically because of injuries. He finally, look at how many times this year he's come back, played a big part for them, had some great games, but then he got hurt. Like, he just seems to be injury prone. So I'm not suggesting they're going to get rid of him or anything like that, but can they lean on him and trust him to be there in the most important games of the year? I don't know that they can. If they bring in another veteran goaltender who's solid and established, like a Saros, for example, then that could be a really, really good tandem. You have ideally a decent number 3 waiting for you in the minors to come up if that happens, if he does get hurt. But UC Saros, like Marner, would have 1 year left on his contract. It's believed he's looking for a big raise. It could be a case for 1 year that both teams could ultimately, even if they don't sign extensions, that they could kind of test drive those superstars in new markets and see if the fit is there, see what they think about the contracts, and kind of go from there. If Marner's going to test free agency anyway, and maybe at least determine that they don't want 4 big major forward salaries like that anymore, it might be a great way for them to fix another part of the team. To be honest, with the amount of money that Saros makes compared to Marner, they could get themselves an all-star goaltender and still have the ability to bring in probably a couple of other players. They might even be able to ask for another player from Nashville, for example. Maybe bring back Luke Shen. I don't know. That's one of the options. He's only making, I think, a couple $1 million. There's lots of great options there. I mean, it gives the Leafs flexibility. It gets Marner to an area where he can be, a little quieter lifestyle that way. A team that desperately needs offense. And it gives them both teams an opportunity to test drive a new superstar and see about a long-term extension. It could be a win-win for both clubs. Now, there's lots of other Marner deals I've seen, suggest it. Doesn't mean that they're going to happen. Like, at the end of the day, if Marner decides that he refuses to waive to go anywheres, he could force them to ride out the season and then become a free agent. It's that simple. And at the end of the day, the Maple Leafs they've handcuffed themselves here with all these no move clauses. And they may run it back just because they're forced to. They can make other changes, but is it really going to make that much of a significant difference? Not if Marner doesn't learn how to play in the playoffs, and if they still have just as hard a time, because they will because of their cap, to have the supporting cast that they have. That's going to be challenging. I mean, there's mutual interest for Domi and Bertuzzi to both return. But again, that's going to be challenging to work out those contracts. There's not a lot of time and space to do that. If they don't bring Samsonov back, they need another goaltender of some kind. It's going to be hard. They have a lot of free agents. There's a lot of turnover because of the money tied up in those top players, that the bottom 6 and some of the defense are always turning over and changing because anytime a player earns a raise, they can't afford to give it and they have to move on. Bobby McMahon could be a prime example of that this offseason. It might be challenging to keep him based on how he played down the stretch just because of the fact that they don't have a lot of space unless they make some big moves, like moving on from one of these big salaries, whether it be Tavares or Marner, which is going to be hard to do because of the protection in their contract. We'll see what happens. But let me know what your thoughts on the blockbuster deal for Marner, for Saros. Does that make sense to you? It doesn't mean it's a 1-for-1. Maybe there's some other pieces in there to kind of satisfy everything. But is that a good groundwork and base for a major trade that you think makes sense for both sides? Well, let me know your thoughts in the comments. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.